Welcome to day two of the Centre Court MBA Festival. My name is Matt Symonds, and with my co-host John Byrne and the team at Poets and Quants, we're hosting senior leaders from the world's top business schools I guess to explore the personal and professional benefits of an MBA, because the MBA, it's not just a credential, it's an investment in your future. And just a reminder for you viewers that after this and any other session during the festival, you can head into the Centre Court lobby and connect, network, ask your own questions via the chat, and of course watch the other previous recordings from day one, which was very busy and very, very interesting. I'm setting the bar very high for today's panelists. I'm delighted with this next session. It explores how MBA programs are preparing future leaders to navigate the opportunities and, of course, the challenges posed by artificial intelligence. AI is transforming every industry, but with that power comes complex questions about accountability, transparency, and the role of human judgment. So, how are business schools integrating ethics and AI into the MBA experience? Now, to tackle that, I'm joined by three exceptional academic leaders, each helping to define what responsible leadership looks like at their business schools. Jeff Moriarty. Jeff is the executive director of the Hoffman Center for Business Ethics at Bentley University. Tina Mabley, a senior assistant dean for the full-time program at UT McCombs in Austin, and Dr. Lawrence Alès, senior associate dean for education and the professor of economics at CMU, Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business. Welcome, all of you. And perhaps we'll start just with a big picture and in a few words, how each of your schools is thinking about this big theme of AI and how it fits in with the MBA experience. Lawrence, can I turn to you to start us off?
Absolutely, and thank you, Matt. And it's a pleasure to be here, and nice to see that AI is getting the attention it deserves. Ethics and AI is weaved in all of our curriculum. Students are required to take a course on ethics. We have additional electives in the space of ethics and AI. We train our students starting from fundamental theory, that's a theme, helping them to prepare not only the challenges that they're experiencing now, but thinking about challenges as they might shape up in 4, 5, 20 years down their career. So this foundation is broad, and it helps students to tackle problems they have not seen yet. The keywords that we have during these courses and also elsewhere in the curriculum is moving the conversation from a more engineering perspective, which is like a can it be done, towards a should it be done. And there you can have very different perspective from the economist, the ethicist, the person in accounting, and so on. So I don't know if those are a few words, but I'll pause here for a second.
Great. Well, we'll be diving a lot deeper. Thank you for getting us started. And perhaps, Jeff, from your vantage point at the Hoffman Center for Business Ethics, AI at Bentley, tell us more.
So AI is on everyone's mind. And one of the things that we're trying to do is create awareness. That AI is everywhere in business and it's making a difference, and that business people and firms need to engage intentionally with AI. It's a tool and it can be very powerful, but it has ethical implications and ramifications. And so we begin with awareness. So to know that AI raises ethical challenges and that the leaders of tomorrow need to be prepared to ask the right questions and to make decisions about AI with an appreciation of its ethical impacts, and to be able to explain those decisions to stakeholders. So people are nervous about AI, and people who use AI need to be able to explain why they're using it and why their use of it is a reasonable choice, but also a fair choice. So it begins with awareness, but this is built into the curriculum in a number of ways through learning experiences, classes, other kinds of events. So let me leave it there, and we can return to it.
Great. Tina, you're renowned for your pithy one-word answers. And if I simply asked you, does AI matter at McCombs, perhaps I would get one of those, but why does it matter?
Sure. I think that for our students, things are changing so fast. and things are happening at such a rapid pace, and it creates a lot of opportunity for businesses and society at large. And so we've really taken an approach to have courses. One of my favorite courses that we have now is leading the human-machine collaboration with one of our management professors who her research, Dr. Shafali Patel, is in the area of high stakes environments like aviation and healthcare. And so, those are critical fields to understand the human impact, how ethics are built into decision making, and yet really critical fields that need to move forward as quickly as possible. Innovation needs to happen. And so for our students, really balancing that need for innovation with doing it responsibly, as my co-panelists have already very nicely articulated.
Well, Jeff, we've already introduced the idea of humans and machines and that relationship. As we look at it perhaps through the lens of business leaders, the urgent challenges that you see that are emerging from the rise of AI in business.
So the four big issues that I think about when I think about AI are transparency, privacy, safety, and bias, and these are kind of all wrapped up together. So on the one hand, when AI is used, it can be a bit of a black box. Certain kinds of AI models they spit out results which are amazing and can be useful, but it's not clear even to the designers of these systems how the results are produced. This is a question about transparency. When a decision is made, people often want that decision to be explained, if that decision, especially if the decision affects them negatively. And depending on what the explanation is, it can raise issues of bias. So the AI is going to spit out information, and this is going to depend on what it's being trained on. So if the data are biased, then the outputs are going to be biased. And speaking of training data, this raises issues of privacy. So AI is trained on all kinds of data, and we're finding out that, or maybe we knew all along, that the data comes from us in various ways, and it wasn't always taken from us with our consent. And companies are rightfully being held accountable for that in courts of law, and those processes are working themselves out. And I suppose the final issue is safety. That's a catch-all term that just means that AI and use of AI can have unintended negative consequences, and maybe the most dramatic of these are AI rising up against us to oppress us in Terminator style fashion. But more realistically, AI can have uses that the designers of those systems never intended, and those uses can be bad. And these issues are not unfamiliar to us. Every new technology comes with side effects that people didn't anticipate that need to be dealt with, and maybe that begins with fire. That's a new technology, and it had great effects, but it also had some side effects that we need to deal with. But AI is the same in that respect.
Right. Hollywood has always had a big imagination to imagine where things might evolve, but I guess having those discussions in an MBA classroom. And Tina, you're very much involved in shaping that MBA journey and the experience of students. How are you seeing students grapple with the questions that AI is raising as it affects leadership and management?
Yeah, what's been really interesting is to see how many, it's really in every topic area that they're pursuing. And where I was just at our MBA coffee this morning and talking to a few students about where they're seeing it in classes that aren't our AI specific classes, but where they're doing things, doing investment analysis as a human and doing it with AI and sort of doing the comparison across the board. And so I think students are really trying to get hands-on experience with it. So, and just as an example, we have a class where day one they do the analysis of the technology and what they're looking at and the ethical implications. And then day two of that week, they bring in a practitioner who's dealing with that particular technology and really have a live case about what they're confronting. And I think students are really looking for that live dynamic kind of understanding what's happening in real time, and understanding that collaboratively, because it really takes different perspectives coming together in that thought process to help them figure out, how they're developing that judgment, getting realistic perspectives on capabilities and limitations.
And those different perspectives, Lawrence, as both an economist and as an academic leader, how do you see AI reshaping these ethical contours of decision making, themes of accountability that Jeff was speaking to?
No, it's the accountability part is quite interesting because, and I'll use a term that Jeff used, which is as a tool. It's kind of like a incredibly unique tool. I like to think about it as it's probably the first tool that we can ask it to define itself. So what this now brings to the table is that the line from tool and human gets blurred. When do we stop thinking it as a tool? When do we start thinking it as a human? Now, this is like an additional layer of complication for business leader in terms of thinking how to approach it, because issues for accountability becomes tricky. Can you have intent? Can you attribute intent to this tool? Can you start thinking about biases for a tool that may not have intent? So this is where the different perspectives are really valuable, because in the classroom we see not only folks who might be trained more in the liberal arts and might thinking about it in terms from an ethics perspective, but also from the engineer side that might have very strong opinion on what this is capable or not of doing. I'll sprinkle there, since you mentioned economists also will start chiming in and start thinking about, well, at the end, in terms of adoption of this tool in a world where regulatory framework are kind of thin, is this something we ought to do? Is this a societal net positive? And that gets really complicated, because now we can start thinking about impact not only on on businesses, but on workers and all of the rest of society. So that's a big mixture of perspective, which makes for an incredibly exciting conversation. So there is a reason why students want not only AI, but want always more of it.
Yeah. As we think about those frameworks, case studies, models, Tina, both of us are so youthful that neither of us were around when Microsoft Excel was introduced into an MBA classroom. But, examples of cases you talked about, day one and day two, tackling real world AI issues, right? Because there's the theory, but how are they then learning to be able to carry that forward with them in the next steps of their career?
Sure. I mean, in some classes, they're looking at AI origin companies, Midjourney, that are Haven, and really looking at companies that are coming at this from an AI perspective. And then they're also building mini cases themselves, and then having other students analyze those for the ethical implications. But really trying to be as hands-on as possible kind of in the work, to really understand kind of the fundamental issues that are happening real time. One of our courses in AI for Competitive Advantage, I had the faculty member wouldn't give me the syllabus until August, before the fall, starting in August. And really, to have that real time, 70% of the readings are from the last 12 months. And so really having students be very current, which isn't, we're used to case studies and sort of theory and developed, but things are happening at such a fast pace that it's building on that theory, but applying it in a real world, real time scenario, and having to kind of, put the wheels on the bus as you're building it. And that's a little bit of that experience for students. And so continuing to kind of push them forward and keep everyone in the conversation as things develop so quickly.
Right. And with that pace of evolution, Lawrence, of course, behind your head is a CMU Tepper statement, the intelligent future, a great reminder. How have you at Tepper been shaping the MBA experience to reflect the skills that graduates will need in their future careers?
For example, in just keeping it in the area of ethics, like we are trying to bring AI as a tool in all of our classes, not only in terms of thinking about it and learning about it, but also in terms of going to, after learning objectives that were not possible before. I'll give you an example. In the ethics class, students besides looking at cases and theory, then they have the experience of using the AI in a variety of ways in terms of addressing a debate. They could work between students and have the AI evaluate their arguments and poke holes on their logical thoughts, but also going after and try to debate with the AI. So the AI becomes a counterpoint. And this provides this continuous exercise, which is going to be particularly important for business leaders that, as it was mentioned before, they will have more and more the need to be able to explain why, right? So it's not only taking a decision, but why was this the right decision? So especially when your tool is not a hammer to make it really easy to explain it. It's a big giant black box. So this is, goes beyond the ethics classes. The collaborative AI is the umbrella term we have for this approach of bringing AI into the classrooms.
Right. With a Hoffman Center for Ethics at Bentley, Jeff, it strikes me as very intentional and, of course, predates this discussion. How does that reflect the approach at Bentley to then develop AI-driven ethical decision-making?
Yeah, so the Hoffman Center for Business Ethics has been around for 50 years. So we celebrate our 50th anniversary in 2026. It was started, way back when it wasn't really even a thing, but business ethics, that is. But it's the university, to its credit, has been a strong supporter of it over many years, and the center has focused on different things at different times. So in the 1990s, when the federal sentencing guidelines were adjusted to make ethics a bigger priority for corporations, that was a focus of the center. These days, of course, when technology is advancing so rapidly, when businesses make use of AI, naturally that's going to be a focus of the center. So we help to guide in formal and informal ways what the university is doing in the area of ethics, and that could be informal programming, one-off events, speaker series, but also engaging with colleagues around the university with respect to course development. We can't take credit for this, but colleagues in various departments at Bentley are developing courses, have developed courses with a strong ethical component that are relevant, that focus on AI and its ethical implications, and that appear in our MBA program. So we have courses taught by our law faculty on ethics and law and social responsibility, courses in the management department on responsible leadership, but also courses in the philosophy department, which is my own department. Naturally, I feel quite sort of favorably disposed towards those courses on ethics and AI. So we have courses taught by philosophers in our MBA program that focus on ethical issues in technology and AI that are being taught to MBA students, and that's maybe one thing we do that's a little bit different. Ethics does pop up in a number of the different disciplines in a business school, but we try to make sure that students are exposed to different facets. Naturally, a lawyer will think about ethics and technology one way, a management person will think about it another way, but a philosopher will think about it yet a third way. And all these perspectives are valuable, and we want to expose students to all of them.
Right. You'd emphasized, Lawrence, the importance of asking why, with results. And at the beginning of the session, we touched on bias and inequity in terms of result generation. Are there particular models or case studies that you're finding at Tepper to be very effective to teach these gray areas where data and ethics intersect?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think like the way in which we usually approach this is, looking at the entire, tree that needs to go into going from training a model to making a decision. And for each point, whether it's the data collection, the training, the usage of the tool, and the impact that the decision might have, we start having a potential ethical discussion. So, already informing students about all of this, it's crucial. So then the data collection is where, of course, is step one, which is where everything starts, and understanding that what the material that comes in is ultimately shaping the answer. So in understanding the technology is step one. The next step is also introducing the issue from a classical perspective, like what is bias from a legal perspective, how has it appeared in previous ethical discussion, and how does AI introduce variation on those traditional themes. And here the aspects about being able to explain the decision, being able to trace it back, being able to prove it, that's a key aspect. And also the aspect about intent that I mentioned earlier, that also is interweaved with this bias. Depending on the type of course, students can get a little bit more in depth and start seeing the mechanics, getting hands-on on how this bias originates in this model. What is also interesting in this is something that some of our researchers will start bringing in the classroom, is that as a technology is also unique in the sense that the output becomes its inputs at some stage into the future, which is adds layers of amplification of bias, meaning that now you start creating bias decision, which will become training set, and now adds bias. So that adds an additional layer of the should. It's almost like you're creating pollution that affects the ethical issue, but then it can have additional other repercussion in terms of impacting not only current societal outcome, but future societal outcome. So going back to your question, start from the technology, look at the classical debate on the topic, and see how AI transforms it in slightly different ways.
Right. Jeff, if I can take you into the classroom, because for the MBA student that possibly has been thinking about these themes of ethics, bias, inequity, they might have been looking at Disney now challenging Claude and other LLMs to be able to, in terms of ownership and other issues. How do you teach this to really bring that sense of awareness of the sort of ethical issues and these outcomes, biases, and others that come up? What really strikes a chord with the students?
So what I tell students is that the issues that AI raises are not actually new ethical issues. So issues about transparency and bias, accountability, privacy, safety, they've been with us for a long time. So let's not be afraid. You've encountered these issues before, perhaps in your own life. Doctors have been handling medical records for years. People have been making decisions that affect you negatively, and that you might want explanations of for years. People act in biased ways, and that has been a problem that afflicts society. So these issues are not new, but what's important to realize is that AI does not actually solve them. So you might think, oh, okay, I have a technical solution to a problem, and I hope that it also solves the sort of the ethical problems that are associated with humans making decisions. But unfortunately, no, it does not. And so before you roll out an AI solution, you need, if you are an employee, to be in a position to ask the right questions, and if you're a manager, before you roll out the solution, to be in a position to defend your use of it against likely objections. So I say, look, let's not be afraid. These are issues that we've encountered before. We have tools that are familiar to not just people interested in ethical theories, philosophers and others, but just ordinary folks who think carefully about what it means to be a good person who wants to do the right thing. You're thinking about whose interests are affected, and what about welfare and harm and rights and so forth. And we can, we start with awareness. The technology doesn't solve the ethical problems, and then we think about a set of tools that could be used to think through ethical issues in a logical and rigorous way, and then we practice. So we try to demystify, and then say, we can do this, and let's do it together.
Right. This issue of the confidence to ask the right questions, Tina, in other Center Court MBA festivals, as we think about the MBA journey and the confidence to talk the language of finance, to be able to then analyze a digital marketing campaign. There's so much confidence that you're infusing in your MBA students at McCombs, as we then translate that to building the confidence to question or challenge AI-driven outcomes that may reinforce the biases and inequity that we're discussing. So from other areas, is there this same approach of building that confidence of the MBA student in this field?
Well, I think, as the ethical side of, as we talked about having AI and ethics in a lot of our courses, I think it's a leadership challenge as well as an organizational organizational design challenge, as much as a technology challenge. And so for our students, our leadership framework has credibility and character. And credibility is making sure you have, a little bit different than confidence. You want to make sure that people have the chops to make sure that they understand the content, they're making good, calculated, critical thinking decisions. And at the same time, that character piece, which is looking at their accountability and understanding the impact of their decision making. And we have an ethics and integrity requirement for the school, and we've had a conversation about it's a flexible requirement that students can satisfy in a variety of different ways, but it's so sort of integrated in so many different places. How are we thinking about that as the place where students are getting that feedback on a regular basis about how their critical thinking and judgment is within, applying ethical frameworks and within the classes that they're in and the projects that they're taking on? How are we sort of using that in every space to make sure students are getting regular feedback during their 2 years? So confidence is important or great for students to have, but more so we want them to have credibility and really understand the reasons behind the decisions they're making, the why. If they're not putting a technology forward, why not yet? Just because it exists doesn't mean we have to use it. So I think really trying to bake that into the whole leadership framework for students as they go through. And we've kind of taken a 2-year leadership arc for students so that they continue to get feedback during that time on these 2 pillars. And because they're not, they're not there yet when they get here. And so we want to create a space where learning and growth can happen in that way.
Right. And following news headlines, Lawrence, whether it's at a geopolitical level, this race, this AI race, and it can all seem very overwhelming with a data-driven automation of so many things and the future of work. What do you share with Tepper students in terms of the skills, the ethical lens that human leaders still bring to the table?
No, it's the interface between data and leadership. It's really interesting. It's there is sometimes this perception that if you have enough data, you're done. You don't need to think hard about the question. This started a few years ago, but even in my class, I teach the main macro class for our MBA. We pay a lot of attention at almost demystifying data, making sure that human has to have a real big role. And in macro, this is easy. It's worth emphasizing how even the data collection takes place. This is really important for some of our students, some of the technical students that come from a science or engineering background. They might treat data like the distance between the sun and the earth as a truth. But unfortunately, once you become in the business world, data is generated by businesses, data is generated by humans who also have motives. So what you're seeing as a number with many digits, you really have to think hard at what it means. Now, this is particularly important because now this data is fed not only to humans that may or may not have a critical eye in analyzing it, but now it's also fed to an AI. And that tool definitely, if not provided with guardrails, will not have this judgment that ought to be in place. So go back to your question. It's like, well, yes, there is a lot of data. Data is like manages with AI in a almost perfect way, but this makes it even more important for humans to be a center, for business leader to be aware and take all of the decisions that might be originating with data and AI with a little bit grain of salt, being able to criticize it and being able to understand them.
Yeah. With thoughts of credibility and analytical skills, Jeff, if I address you as the philosopher on our session today, and finding that balance between a data-driven focus, cultivating sound judgment and reflection. So viewers that, of course, that your MBA classrooms reflect the diversity of their own professional backgrounds. How would you reassure them in terms of an approach, skills that you'll be looking to enhance and develop, but still these fundamentals of judgment that are going to be so important to them as they move forward in their careers?
So it's a difficult problem. So how do we, cultivate a sense of judgment and critical thinking that's going to be a sound basis for kind of all future choices? I would say there's no simple solution to that, and it involves some practice with cases, discussions with other people. But I think it doesn't involve the cultivation of an open mind, and perhaps maybe that's the most important thing. So uh, there's no one who knows everything anymore, and maybe that has been the case for hundreds of years. But going forward, it seems that knowledge is more siloed, and to some extent that's inevitable because it requires specialized training and ability that not a single person can have, across multiple domains. So if we're training good business leaders, we're going to train people with open minds who are willing to admit that they don't know everything, and who are going to be willing to admit that they need to be able to ask the right questions, and they're also going to need to be able to hear answers that they don't necessarily want to hear. Well, answers like, "Oh, I'm not sure we should make that sale or open up that line of business, even if it might lead to financial success in the short term." So a leader who is willing to ask questions and who is willing to hear what they don't want to hear is going to be important, and I think that will be a basis for sound decision making. I think it will lead to fewer mistakes, keeping in mind that mistakes are inevitable. If we want to reduce them, then we need to keep an open mind and make decisions as objectively as possible, and realize that we can't know everything ourselves, and we have to rely on others.
I love that we're having this session at Center Court, for as we think about financial modeling, reading balance sheets, so many other skills, just I think the window that you're opening up to viewers of how thoughtful, how philosophical, these different issues are, and the sort of classroom discussions that must develop. In terms of discussions and communication, Tina, there you are in Austin, heart of innovation, and so many tech firms that surround you. There's this idea that on quarterly calls, the CEO says, "Yes, we're building AI," or "We must have AI." But they actually don't know what they want or what they need. But when you talk to employers about upskilling, AI, ethical judgment, what sort of feedback are you getting from employers of the skills that they want to see in your graduates?
Yeah, I think the nice thing to hear from MBA programs, I know, we've been in this business for a long time, and the skills that are needed today are those really human skills. And that's what we're hearing from our employers. How are they building high reliability, just accountability cultures where, students can have a healthy preoccupation with failure. So it's okay to fail. And how can we make that a cultural norm with in this high achieving culture, and where you're trying to, get funding, or you're trying to show that you're ahead of the next organization. I think the having robust feedback loops, and I think that's part of the in process, students having real feedback from peers that that is a culture that we want to cultivate for them as they build their cultures, and we want them to calibrate their trust, and know not if they should trust AI, but when and how. And employers really want students to have experience with the technology, and so that's a key fundamental piece, but really not to let go of all the human skills. The hearing from my colleagues, the things that we're teaching in ethics are still the same today as they were before. It's just the technology is changing at such a fast pace that they may be applied in different ways. But our employers are still looking for those very human skills to come out of our leader, the cultivation of future leaders. So it's a dual process, building that tech savvy and understanding of how to identify emerging technologies and understand how to adopt them quickly and analyze them, but also to really build and rely on and trust the human skills that students come to business school for.
Right. So there's the feedback loop from employers. As I think about the students, Lawrence, a few weeks ago, there was a cry from a very well-known business school on the West Coast. We won't name it, but we all know it, where students complained that they weren't learning anything. Now, what are your students telling you that they want to learn about AI? Are they able to articulate and formulate that?
The type of screams I hear, it's midterm session this week, so the type of screams I hear coming from the hallways is not one of we're not learning anything. It's like, please, can we put it down a notch? But I think like what is accelerating is the changing demand from employers and how students are wanting to see those demands fulfilled in their classroom. So as the landscape changes a lot, they see like, well, in the interviews, this is what they need. They're posting, this is what they're looking for. And that cycle is accelerating. So there are ways in which we can handle it by having, within the same framework of classes, what happens inside the classroom evolves constantly. So clearly thinking about AI in every single class is becoming more and more common. It doesn't matter if it's an econ class or a marketing class or an ethics class. That's where we see a lot of the frontier moving. At the same time, there is an increased interest in a lot of the technical aspects. So there we have to proceed on almost two tracks for those people who want to think about AI not only as, well, this is something that's going to be in my own area of business, but for perhaps the entrepreneur or the folks who want to think about a slightly more technical position, how can I skill up? So then those are classes that we can provide, whether it's more on machine learning, more on Python. And here, what we can leverage nicely is the rest of the university where a lot of this work is being conducted and students can tap in easily. So we're helping them make those connections.
Right. We were talking, Jeff, earlier about the upcoming 50th anniversary of the Hoffman Center and of course, themes of ethics that have themselves adapted in the 1990s and up until today. If students said, yes, but we just want this simple solution, how do you push back in terms of a mindset, perhaps an agility? Because we've all said how quickly these things are moving. So what do you want to instill in your students to be agile and to be able to continue to move with that rapid pace of development?
So I'll start with the idea that there's no simple solutions. There's no simple algorithm that you can use to figure out what the right thing is to do. And maybe that's not surprising because AI ethics is a part of ethics, and there's no simple algorithm for figuring out what to do with your life and with your time and how to spend it, and how much you should spend of your time helping other people versus advancing your own personal projects. So that's the bad news. But the good news is we start with awareness. A lot of ethical mistakes happen because people don't realize they're in a situation that calls for ethical reflection. They're kind of sleepwalking into a moral dilemma and then out of the moral dilemma and without any idea that moral reflection was required. So we begin with awareness. And then what I do in my classes is try to walk students through a very simple ethical decision-making process that begins with awareness and thinking about who is affected and how they're affected, but also thinking about how you might justify the decision to people who are affected, especially negatively by the decision. And then finally, learning from the decision that you've made. And that's a perfectly general kind of decision-making process. It doesn't rely on knowledge of Aristotle or Kant, even if that's not such a bad thing for anyone to read a bit of Aristotle or Kant in their lives. It doesn't probably make sense as part of a decision-making procedure you're going to roll out in your life or in your business. But there are ways of making it simpler, try to providing some structure to what might seem like a bunch of disconnected or possibly conflicting moral demands, but recognizing that it's hard, and the goal is not so much to figure out what is exactly the right thing to do and do it every time, but rather to figure out the space of possible choices that are permissible and choose one of them and be able to defend it while at the same time avoiding the maybe larger space of ethically impermissible choices.
You've helped us, Jeff, to replace the GMAT and the GRE that often come up in a Center Court MBA Festival panel with Aristotle and Kant. How about that?
You're welcome.
Just a couple. As the Dean of Education at Tepper, just a final question for you, Lawrence. Looking forward, and as you think about how you'll be teaching ethics and AI in business school, is there anything that you would change or something that you really want to move towards?
Yeah, no, I would be like more in terms of what I would like students to get at. And I think for a lot of students, they maybe approach ethics as thinking about here is one additional item I need to check in making sure that my decision is, in line with even perhaps moral principles. So instead, what I would like them more and more to think is that, ethics is all about rational decision making, and it's all about achieving a decision that is sustainable in the long run. So this is not a constraint; it should be in the long term an asset. So this is sometimes for some students a tough decision, a tough point to get behind.
Yeah, and perhaps bringing us full circle, Tina, I'd said at the beginning, the MBA is more than a credential, it's an investment in your future. And I think the three of you have given us a tremendous mirror to that. Candidates thinking about their futures, the future of work, their careers that clearly AI will feature. Just your words of why business school, the MBA, is going to better prepare them for that future.
Yeah. I think MBA programs, it's almost like learning a language by jumping in with both feet. And so I think being in the environment and testing yourself and your peers, it's a huge 2-year personal development program. And I think everyone around you is pushing to have the most current information, and you have an ecosystem of alumni who are interested in kind of finding out what's continuing to happen in business school. You have faculty who are pushing the envelope with their research, as well as bringing practitioners into the classroom. So you really have this live laboratory that is hands-on, and students get to experience it, and it iterates every year. We have I've been in this role for 15 years, and we really try to take an agile approach, as most of our peer schools do, to the curriculum, and iterate regularly to make sure that we are really at the front edge of what's happening. And if we're not if it isn't happening yet, how can we bring something in real time where students bring projects in and analyze them with their peers and have ongoing dialogue and conversation, and just stepping into a group of students and asking them what they're thinking about. It's pretty amazing to hear all the things that come in. And I wanted to say, you know, with Jeff bringing up Kant, one of the things I've noticed is our tech professionals that come in and speak to our students, you get a lot more philosophy coming in into those conversations than you have in the past. In the past, it was, this is how I was so successful and how I, you know, this was my third attempt and it was a win and this is why I was so great at it. And now it's a lot more philosophical about, you know, why are we taking the technology we are and how are we developing that and how are we moving forward? And it's really, and also taking kind of a macro view to that. So that's been interesting to see as well.
We've come from Athens to Austin. What a long road. I must admit, I was 8 years of the Centre Court Festival co-hosting with John. I was nervous coming into this panel that I would be out of my depth, maybe that I'd need to switch to a digital avatar to get through this. And you've made it incredibly accessible, very thoughtful, enormously helpful, I think, in terms of viewers and their own thoughts on this and how you're helping them to give real shape and substance to those thoughts. So, Lawrence, Jeff, Tina, thanks for a really memorable, a really rewarding session at Centre Court. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Matt.
Enjoyable. Thank you all.